Welcome, everybody, to Recovery Machine. My name's Nathan. I believe we're on episode 19. Is that right, Corey?
I think so. Yep.
All right. I'm joined here with my co-host, Corey. He's on location in Parksville on the island, I think.
Yeah. Almost had a beautiful seascape view behind me, but the lighting was making it impossible to see me. So,
no,
trust me, I'm here.
We need a higher production budget, everybody. So something to think about.
Yeah.
Today, we are happy to be joined by Dr. Nick Jensen, who is a naturopathic doctor. Him and his lovely wife, Sonia. That's Sonia's the wife's name?
Yep. That's the one. Yep.
They have a naturopathic clinic. So they're both naturopathic doctors. And I believe it's in Kitsilano, and it's called Divine Elements.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been, I think you guys have been open for a little while, right? Almost a decade or more.
Yeah. We opened in 2009. So just going into our 13th year. Yeah.
Very cool. So pretty well established in the area. Whereabouts is it?
It's for anyone who knows the Kitsilano area, we're right next to right nearby McDonald Street. So it's right on Broadway near McDonald Street. But it's on Broadway and Stevens.
Yes, I used to live very close to there, actually.
Oh, no kidding. Whereabouts did you live?
It would have been 2005, 2006, and I would have been probably, I think, maybe 2 or 3 blocks up from you there.
Okay.
On 11th, somewhere around there.
Cool.
But yeah,
it's a nice area. I mean, it's a very, I would say, health conscious, small town inside the city kind of a vibe. So yeah, we love it here. Yeah.
It's filled with beautiful people.
Yeah.
my
a lot of yoga around here. And,
yes.
Smoothies. Yeah.
Yeah. My sister and her husband, both very good looking people. They're in Kitsilano now. And it's funny how well they fit in down there. And just, it's quite a culture.
Yeah, there must be some sort of vortex that attracts people who want to take care of themselves in this area. So I think there's something to be said there.
Yeah. It might be contagious. I know.
That's a good way of looking at it, actually.
When my cousin, I'm from Quesnel, and when I grew up, you didn't ever see anyone jogging. There was, we had kind of the gym was like people were starting to get into that, right? And then I remember when I moved from from Kamloops down to Vancouver, he came down. That would have been something like 2009, and he's driving along in his truck. He gets into the city, and he's like, "What are all these people running from?" Like, he kept looking behind him, thinking there was a problem. He's like, "No, man, they just exercise."
Right.
And he's like, "What? They're just trying to stay healthy." But,
well, you don't need that as much in Quesnel. I mean, you're slogging through the snow, and it's like every step feels like a stair climber, I imagine.
Well,
in the wintertime.
Yeah, you're either shoveling snow or
outdoors, right? You're active.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose that's true.
Nick, we'll get started with just sort of a little bit more of your backstory, I guess. How did you come into the world of naturopathic medicine? What factors sort of led you in that direction? And how did you find it?
To be honest, I think a lot of it. My mom's been such a huge inspiration in my life, and we grew up healthy, no sugar. I played basketball up into college, and so living a healthy lifestyle was just part and parcel to growing up. And to be honest, when I got out of college, I really knew that I just wanted to be in healthcare to some degree. And I thought dental school, I just wanted to make a lot of money. My parents told me that's a good business to get into, and they seem to do well for themselves. And I ended up doing the DAT, the dental aptitude test, and just got my ass kicked. I just did not do well. You had to carve soap, and it was very intricate, and it was very stressful. And I was writing that DAT during my midterm exams in my last year of college. And so I really didn't spend a lot of time studying for it. And I had to do a bit of a gut check, I think, after I graduated, and thought, okay, I have an idea of what my parents want me to do, because they want, obviously, me to take care of myself and not be reliant on them, I'm sure. And then there's this sort of insight for what is it that I really want to do. I knew that there was something to do with health. I had no desire to be a doctor. I tried to avoid doctors at all costs. It was a real, it would be a real strong reason to go in, and maybe I'd be, bleeding out at, some sort of surface of my body, and then I'd consider going to the hospital. But the sight of blood and all that stuff was real, not an attraction for me. And then after, I think it was the day that I graduated from college, my mom gave me a pamphlet. She had seen a couple naturopathic doctors. She said, why don't you just read through this? And I read through the curriculum, and I remember thinking like, wow, this is a really interesting stuff. Like they're learning homeopathy, herbal medicine, acupuncture, Chinese medicine. There's all these different components that really got me excited about, oh, I could see myself doing this. I don't want to be a doctor, but I could see myself learning these things because I had such a deep interest. And I didn't realize I did until I started seeing what kind of options were there. So that was kind of the first little nudge in that direction. And so shortly after graduating from college, I applied and got in, and that's where it all began.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field, and I don't think that I remember I had a couple of friends who were looking at going that direction. It's very competitive, as any kind of all the medical fields were. But I think the naturopathic route, there wasn't very many spots available at the time in Canada per year. Was that the case when you went through?
Definitely. I mean, I went to school in New Westminster. It's called Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine. There's only 2 schools in Canada. And so, yeah, there's a limited amount of space that was accepting, into these 2 schools. There's about 5 schools from what I remember now in the US, or there was at the time. And I had no desire to pay tuition fees in American dollars. And so it was great that there was something in our backyard. So I applied, and I think I just applied at the right time. And the school is sort of new and budding, and they were only taking, I think it might have been like 20, 25 people per class.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was a really small school. I mean, we really, when I entered the program there, they had yet to get accreditation. There was accreditation in Toronto where the school is more established, but this one was relatively new. And so the timing seemed right. And, and obviously there's no entrance exam. It was just making sure I had all the prerequisite courses, all the same prerequisites you'd need for dental school or medical school or anything else. So it was timing and the right fit and a new school, and it seemed like a fun opportunity.
Yeah. Has it changed fairly rapidly since you've started?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. In a big way. I mean, they changed locations, expanded. There's an on-site clinic now, which there was in our second and third, or sort of third and fourth year. It's become much more robust. It's now been, and again, I don't know all the details, but I know it's been amalgamated now with CCNM, or the college from Toronto. This is kind of their Western campus now. So I think it's all called CCNM West or in East. But again, since being out of the school trauma is traumatizing, man. You go there and it's completely opposite of what a naturopathic, lifestyle might look like, as you can imagine. Yes. Rigorous, pharmacology school. I mean,
it's ridiculous.
Brutal, right?
Yeah. 90% of what I learned there, I don't apply. And it's like, that's okay, because I'm interested in the field. I love that. Like, I like the, anything chemistry, biology, I'm very interested in, and I love to learn.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as application goes, man, it's in community pharmacy. It's like, you might as well, 30% of what I do is basically calming people down and trying to get their medications faster and cheaper to them. That's about it.
Totally. Yeah. Isn't it fascinating? I mean, it's, pressure makes diamonds, as they say. And I think part of it is just, going through this rigorous training and these like ridiculous number of exams and expectations and, hoops to jump through. And I know it just keeps getting more and more intense, I think, as each year goes on and sophistication of the programs come together and whatnot. But yeah, it's a different world in school versus out in, this version of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how long after you graduate did you? So I guess according to, I looked, we were researching it, of course, and we see on your bio there that it talks about you doing further. You wanted to go and look at other modalities in other countries, Southeast Asia. And so you did a little traveling. Was that after school, and that's where you met your wife? Is that?
Yeah, to be honest, halfway through my naturopathic education, I realized there was this sort of meeting point of my early history of wanting to please my parents and doing it. Like I told you guys before we press record, that like they still work 7 days a week. Like there's no such thing as taking a break, let alone traveling the world and, you know, not making money, sustaining yourself and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this crisis point between depression and just my own self-worth and living my own life, and this collision course of what the expectation of what I should be doing to fulfill, you know, my future. And halfway through naturopathic school, I said, screw it, I can't do this anymore. And so I took a year off and traveled the world and found myself, or started to find myself at the beginning of that sort of internal and emotional and spiritual journey. And then the biggest worry on my parents' end was I wouldn't come back. Right.
Right.
You started
right.
something, you better finish this. And I held that in suspension. I didn't really tell them at the time, but I knew in my mind that I had no idea what the next year would look like. And, you know, anyways, I came back and I had obviously an amazing adventure. So that was my first getaway out of the world. And then, yeah, when Sonia and I graduated, we taught English in Taiwan for 14 months and traveled through Cambodia and Thailand and India. And I mean, it was a magical time to just not only just fall in love and create a deeper connection with one another, but also to travel the world. And, you know, Sonia and I, we like to say that our number one biohack is putting yourself in uncomfortable situations through traveling. And, you know, obviously we all have different stories of fumbling around in different countries where you don't understand the language and screwing up, and learning from those mistakes are invaluable.
Yeah.
So that was life before we actually opened up our practice here.
Right. Yeah, there's something to that for sure. It's almost like you're using a different part of your mind, or I guess it just forces you to be in a kind of an elevated state when you're in a country where English isn't the primary language, or if you've never been there before and you're trying to get around with transit and stuff like that. It's challenging. Definitely good for you. I've never thought of it as a biohack, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you tap into resources you didn't realize you had, because you're forced to.
Yes.
You know, you have to get from point A to point B. You got to figure out how to do that. You got to eat food. You got to figure out how to order that, or, you know, or buy it from the grocery store, and it looks different than what you're used to. I mean, there's so much about, you know, cultivating, you know, confidence in yourself and just your ability to overcome situations and to feel more connected, you know, to yourself and your intuition. And obviously, if you're traveling with someone, you're going to feel that sense of bonding and attachment and still finding your individuality in it. You know, there's these little victories, whether it be, you know, getting, I mean, there was a time we were in Pai in Thailand, and we were riding our scooter and trying to get to this amazing destination, and our scooter broke down. And, you know, we're traveling, we don't really have a timeline. Of course we want to get to our destination for that day, but we're kind of like, you know what, well, the scooter broke down, what are we going to do? Well, we just kind of sat at the side of the road and just, I mean, I opened up the hood and I have no idea what I'm looking at. But anyways, at some point, a family came along with a pickup truck. And again, we're not speaking the language. They're like, come on, they threw the scooter in the back of the truck. We went for a ride. They took us to the shop, got the scooter fixed, and on we went. You know, and there was no sense of dread or like worry. It was just kind of like, what else can we do? Let's start pushing this bike down the road and see what happens. And, you know, I think in our Western world, I would have easily gotten rescued like that. I got the BCA card. I can call my mom or dad or a friend, and, you know, it's going to get taken care of. But when you're somewhere isolated, you just use the resource you have. And sometimes it's just patience and trust, you know?
Yeah.
So many lessons.
Absolutely. And that's kind of a trial by fire for a relationship too.
Oh, totally.
I mean, if you're traveling with somebody like that, you see the real, you know, the level of patience the person has, their stress tolerance, their ability to communicate effectively, work as a team. All that stuff's going to come out. And also, like you said, being able to maintain some kind of an individual self when you're basically leaning on each other like that the whole time. So it'd be kind of like you said, a bonding experience, but also, a really good trial run for if you're thinking of doing something like getting married.
Yeah,
probably a good way to do it.
Trial by fire. That's exactly it. Yeah.
So Nick, can you give us an idea of what a day in the life in your practice looks like a bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so much of our practice, I mean, our philosophy is live it to lead it, and so there's little to nothing that I've recommended for people that haven't done it myself. So I always really intentionally, I mean, every day is a little different. You know, we've got young kids, so my morning practice isn't always perfect, but ideally I do something every day to serve myself and have some sort of connection to something greater than me, and do my breath work, my meditation, my movement. And so that kind of philosophy of ownership over your mental emotional state, over your physical space, over your physical body, the nutrition you put in, those are the core essence, I think, of teaching that we want to extract out of the people that we work with. I mean, especially in recovery, there's, in the world of recovery, there's so much disconnect, from that aspect of themselves, and there's so much dependence, right? Whether it be the medication, the drug, the alcohol, whatever. So, and that could just be a food addiction, right? And so I think step one is to really help people recognize that there's this capacity for connection, and sometimes it's really small, it's subtle, we don't really tune into it. But if that can be the merging point where we start to realize that there's a way out of the struggle that people are in, that would definitely be step one. And that can come through many different ways. Maybe it comes through embodiment with exercise and movement. Maybe it comes through new appreciation of food. And we teach a lot of fasting. That sometimes comes from a place of going for a period of time without food, and really getting in touch with that emotional body that comes up and speaks to us or yells at us, hey, it's 12 o'clock, time to eat. Where's my food? That kind of thing. And through supplementation and creating a new relationship to the kinds of things that really nourish us and what don't, and the things that don't, and that could be relationships and everything else. So that it's sort of like a coming to, I say God moment, but it's sort of coming to meeting ourselves, with people in the room. It's really about how are you willing to meet yourself now, and are you willing to establish a new connection to you and what's possible. And some people are, and some people aren't, and it's not my place to tell people that where they have to be. It's more like, here's an opportunity to be here, and we'll walk that path with you if you're ready.
If they're ready. Yeah. You've probably seen people who have the best of intentions, but are simply too disconnected from maybe their own body. Like you said, the sensations that you feel when you're hungry. I don't think that in our culture, there's enough appreciation for learning what those signals mean and being able to find ways to cope with those if they're uncomfortable. Myself, I grew up kind of unwittingly self-soothing with food and got away with it just because I was a bigger guy and active and stuff like that. But, that pattern was established well before I knew really what I was doing. I was already self-soothing in that manner. So it was an easy kind of move forward for me into addiction with drugs.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's imprinted on us from our surroundings. As kids, we just soak up the environment. We whether or not we intellectualize our parents going through stress, we see how they handle it. My dad was an alcoholic, and it pains me to say that because, I think he would cringe if I even heard him, or if he heard me say that. But at some point he had to come to the realization that he had to address this. But we saw how he handled his stress. And again, not that I could intellectualize it at a 5 or 7-year-old. I just saw my dad getting drunk a lot, throwing up on my skateboard, or like being really irritable at different times, growing up, and like, oh geez, I don't really want to be around my dad right now. He's drinking. And looking back, we can see, so many of our behaviors could come from that. Going through my own sort of teenage partying years, I saw an escape there, and it was an enjoyable way to, spend some of my early years. But, with many addictions, and whether it be food or your attachment to TV or, whatever it is, we find solace in that experience until, at some point it no longer serves us. And I think that, to the point of are people ready to make a change? That's sort of the realization I think we all have to come to, because we're all guilty of like not following through with plans. We all get lazy. I know I do. I'm not perfect by any means.
Mm-hmm.
But do we have a capacity to go, okay, I'm gonna go at this again. I'm gonna figure it out this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you said the piece about kind of reestablishing a connection with what we're feeling physically and then what to do about it, and to pay attention to that. And like, it makes me think about, for myself, like there was such a relearning about mindfulness and relearning about discomfort within my own body and how my own body was feeling and what I was doing to my body, but then also that connection with the mind and that discomfort from the mind. For me, at least, the discomfort from the mind was much more uncomfortable than the discomfort within my body that I was feeling.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let's maybe to take it down a road of someone who's still actively in addiction, or someone who's in very early recovery. If they came to you, how would you start with them? And what would be some things that you might recommend?
Yeah. I think, when we think of someone in that, depending on how they're relating to their moment, because someone who can be in active addiction could be in denial. Someone in active addiction could be, really reaching out for help. And someone could have just got their butt pushed in here because their partner said, you better take care of this or I'm out of here. And so there's an ultimatum. And I think, whatever that's the first thing to establish is like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Really, why are you here? What brought you here? Because it's sort of a conversation of willingness and desire for connection, and it's all those things. But obviously we want to try to meet people where they are, and I think to say like what to do next is that when we're stuck in that narrow focus of this is my entire reality, there's a lack of choice. It's like, I don't know anything else. It's so focused on the problem. We say this about pain too. Pain is the worst thing ever that it could ever happen. And when it's gone tomorrow, you forgot that it was there, because you have more faculty, you got more choices. And so I think one of the first things, once we orient people towards like, why are you actually here? Do you want to be here? Is this the right time for you? Of course, I want it to be the right time for everybody. I want people to move out of their suffering, but again, that's out of my hands. But my first opportunity is to help people physically feel more energy so they have more choices. So if we wanted to get really reductionist, we'd say we'd be doing things to optimize mitochondrial function. We'd be taking out the sugars, we'd be taking out the stresses, the toxins, the things that are overwhelming your system, so that you stay so narrow in your focus. Because in that narrowed focus, you've got a ton of inflammation and really low energy. And so we get more choice when we have more energy on a cellular level.
Dr. Nick, I couldn't agree more with the statement about where are you now as far as an opener. And I think, can you imagine, Corey, if treatment centers started with that question? Somebody walks in, and instead of, most of the time it's mandated, or like you said, it's the end of the road before a marriage fails, whatever. There's a few people who go there willingly, but honestly, I didn't see many of them in this, like these centers that are really pumping people through quite ineffectively. If they were to do something like that, imagine the efficiency increase right off the bat, because the people who actually want to be there, I mean, this is what, when people ask me for my take on the problems that they're having, that's the first question I ask. What do you want? Do you want to make a change, or are you making this change to make someone else happy? What's the motivating factor? And if it's anything else, then I want to make a change because I'm not happy anymore with the way things are going. This behavior is no longer serving me. Then I believe there's a good chance of making that change from that new perspective. But without it, different story.
Well, it's an interesting point you bring up too. You think about success rates in a lot of these places. If like, let's say 75%, or maybe that's even being conservative, 75% of the people don't really want to be there. Maybe 25% do. Think about being in the energy of, going back to maybe in our teenage years, the influence. You could be wanting to do the right thing, but you're in a vibe, you're in a frequency, you're in a collective where people are going through something similar to you. You see the majority of them are like, I can't wait to get out of here so I can get back to my drink or whatever it might be. That has massive influence. And so, yeah, what if we did have, in these traditional or conventional recovery centers, what if we had the people that actually really wanted to be there, and we could somehow find the right tools to filter those people into that right category? So they're actually separate. They were in their own little community or their own little cocoon or bubble where they could really be, there could be a lot of cohesive nurturing. What would that do? And do nothing else except for just that one thing. And that starts with that question, right?
My God, you'd have the most successful treatment center in the country.
No
immediately.
Because you could build a program around that. And then those that don't really want to be there, what does that look like? Is that, what kind of experience could you create for those people? Or, this might be a really interesting way to introduce plant medicine or other things like that, where it's sort of a kick in the pants, so to speak, because maybe they don't really want to be there. And then they're just scratching something that's like, oh, I don't even know what that is. And I'm interested in taking a look at that again.
I think the term, my impression is that the term rock bottom is sort of falling out of favor, and that it's being challenged. But you do still hear people using the term rock bottom, or that they haven't hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. But I think that my experience, at least, and I think probably Nathan, you might agree that it is more about maybe seeing the window, seeing the glimmer of hope, or seeing an opportunity there for change. And I don't blame the folks who haven't seen that window yet, because that can be very much environmental or circumstantial, or about family, or about trauma, or a host of things. And education, I think, is certainly probably a part of that. I loved what you said too about providing someone with more energy, or helping someone to obtain more energy, opens that door too even further.
Well, think about, like, if we go back to the conventional model, there's nothing around driving more energy into the cells. Like we're making it a very heady cerebral experience. Like there's shame, there's disappointment, there's frustration. There's like, oh shit, here we are again. We're like another relapse. It's so cerebral. It's not experiential at all. And what would it be like if physiologically, we sort of like, we understand that there's a mental emotional process going on, and let's just keep that here. We know that there's something there. There's your story. There's the reason why you're here. There's the trauma, all of that. And while we're appreciating that, maybe we don't even have to dive into it. Let's just teach you how to build cellular energy so that then now you have more resource, more choice. And what does detox look like? I mean, this is the whole role of NAD, but what does detox look like when your cells have more energy to detox? What does it look like when your brain has more, like, less brain fog? I can actually listen and learn now. Whereas before I was like, I just need to know how to get out of this uncomfortable space that I'm in. Right. So yeah, I think that's where, you guys are talking about this, like that we definitely talk about this. I think that's where we have an opportunity to really honor this physical vehicle that we have. And how do we put some energy into that? And that's the nutrition, the fasting, all the fun, recovery tools that we can optimize, even nootropics, like things to optimize brain function. And, so yeah, I think that's where the energy needs to go.
Yeah. This is absolutely my number one problem for me. When I was trying to, the first time I tried to just kind of cold turkey off of opiates, I did that with pharmaceutical support. I had a supplement regimen, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't enough, because I still didn't, well, there was many factors involved, but the main factor was I hadn't seen what Corey's talking about with the window. You're talking about with the window. I call it the trapdoor in the cell under the rug. If you don't know that that's there, you're not getting out. Yeah. And when you're in that state of hopelessness, which is you reach a level of despondence where it doesn't matter what somebody offers you, you don't believe them. You think, oh yeah, you think you can fix me? No, can't be done. And once you give that person just a little bit, maybe it's because you got them back up to 25% of their natural endorphins and enkephalins, whatever. It gave them enough relief for that moment, so they started to think there was just a little bit of light, just a glimmer of hope. And for me, that's what I needed, was that I needed to know it was possible.
Yeah. Well, I think, sometimes, I mean, all of us, I think we all grow up, our physical bodies grow, but our emotional bodies, we've never been, whether it be initiated into a new type of thinking, we get indoctrinated into the school systems, and we become really good rule followers until we want to break the rules and realize that we don't like the rules. But our graduation through our emotional body is really limited, I think. And so, I would use the example of, imagine so I've got two small boys. Actually, my son came into our bedroom last night because the wind was so loud, and it was, making noise in his room. And maybe he interpreted that as someone like breaking in, or maybe he interpreted as like, there's a scary monster there and I don't want to be near him. And that obviously he grows up and realizes that's just the wind, and maybe it's the window banging against, the frame or what have you. And, oh, I can solve that problem. I can just go over and close the window. Everything's fine. But he came into our bed, of course. And, I think of that sort of analogy with when we're stuck in that narrowness of our focus of all that we know is the suffering that we're in right now. We're kind of like that little boy, that little girl who's interpreting what's going on as something so heavy and so uncomfortable. And we only ever have one tool. In my son's case, he had to leave the room. Maybe in someone who's in, relapsing, whatever, it's the bottle, it's the drug, it's the marijuana, it's the food that just takes you out of that moment, because that's the place of safety. And really what we're allowing people to do, or what people are allowing themselves to do, is just have more faculty. They can, oh, well, that's just a window banging against the door. Oh, this is, I'm just getting myself into a cycle of addiction again. I know how to pull myself out of that because I can look at it from a different angle. So I think, that emotional growth and the physical, the physical vehicle, as we embody more of that cellular energy. I mean, I think it's all of these things. We have more perspective, more ability to look at things from different angles.
So is that something that you talk about with your clients, or teach about sort of maybe taking an inventory or doing a self check-in to even recognize? Because it makes me think that there might be days where, certainly early on, where I wasn't checking in with myself yet of if I even had more energy. Am I actually feeling better today? Yeah. How did I feel after that long walk or long hike or whatever it was? So how do you kind of incorporate that?
Yeah, well, we definitely, we encourage people to, great question. I mean, we encourage people to become their own doctor, start asking questions. We usually go, I call it the OM formula, observations versus meaning. And we're so busy making meaning of things through the day. Everything, there's meaning in it, right? Of course there's meaning in it, but we're not observing it. We're not tracking it. So we usually get people that, track your bowel movements. What's your energy like? How'd you sleep? What'd you eat? How'd you feel after you ate? What kind of conversations did you have that day? Like, were they volatile? Did you learn something? Are you feeling resentment? And so a tracking sheet of and then getting in the habit of observation, I mean, that's sort of like present time consciousness too, I guess you could call it. But I think if there's criteria, even temperature checking, if there's objective measurements you can take a look at to see how your physiology, your body is actually responding to your environment, you can get a lot more like a doctor. You can get a lot more investigative with what's happening. And then we don't have to, like, we can just suspend meaning for a period of time, because the meaning drives our behavior, right? Tony Robbins says this. He's like, the three things, like, what are you focusing on? So that could be someone coming into the center for the first time. What are you focusing on? Well, like, I hate my partner, and every time my partner does this, I drink. And so, like, that's what we're focusing on. So you're giving meaning to that moment. So that's the second thing. Like, so first thing, what do we focus on? Second thing is, what are we giving meaning to it? So, well, that person is driving my behavior. They're the problem. This is the solution. That's the meaning that I've created. And therefore I'm stuck in the cycle of addiction. It's their fault. And then the third thing is the behavior that accompanies that meaning. And so I think if we can remove ourselves from meaning making and just get into observation, we can start to, close that gap and move us into an appropriate direction. But yeah, I mean, we encourage that for everybody. But again, people have to be willing and wanting to be open to that. I'm learning Spanish right now. I took Spanish in college, and we had a chance to go travel, and it's just like, I love being in that language. I love listening to it. Like, it's just fascinating to hear different languages that you really, really love and you wish you could speak. I suck at it, but I'm still willing to learn it. and that's that apprenticeship phase, I think, that we can all either take part in or just want to, deny it and get as far away as possible from that apprenticeship phase.
It's a very important phase. I consider it to be part of one of my primary tenets, which is vulnerability and willingness to be vulnerable, willingness to look stupid. Which, that's a tough one for me because I don't know, I want to, if you're not, it's the difference between, I think, why one of the reasons kids are so malleable. I mean, we know that they're willing, they don't care if they're looking stupid. They're just out there having fun, and they half the time they don't even realize they're learning. They're just living in the moment of their experience. But it's very important. I also have tried to learn Spanish multiple times, and I'm currently not trying because I'm frustrated. But I feel the same way about the language. I love the language, and I wish I could speak it.
Yeah.
I should just move there.
That goes back to traveling, right?
Yes.
There you go. More travel.
So I guess what we'd really like to provide here for people is we want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about some of the specifics that you guys use. Now, I know that's gonna, like you said, that's a reductionist approach right away, and that's kind of. That's our culture, I guess, but I'm sure you're used to that. But you've mentioned a few different modalities here. The one that I've really been interested in and have been using myself is NAD+. And I think lots of people have kind of heard of that by now. It's a coenzyme that's important in all sorts of cellular metabolic and anabolic processes within the cell. And you use it at the clinic specifically for people who are is it just early treatment, or do you have one for patients who are still suffering from post-acute withdrawal, stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I really embrace the model that Dr. David Sinclair talks about. He's one of the preeminent researchers on NAD, and he's I don't know if I totally agree with this, but he's sort of labeled aging as the disease.
Right. I've heard this.
Yeah. And what an interesting way of looking at things, so if you look at cardiovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, typically diabetes, although that is happening younger. So many of the illnesses that we see are a result of aging. And, even the process of addiction, we're usually not becoming self-aware at 13 or, 15 even, at some point there has to be some sort of time, I guess, that lapses. But anyways, going back to NAD and this sort of role in this disease or this aging process, maybe in our 20s or 30s, we might have, 70 to 80% of our NAD supply. But by the time we're in our 90s, we've got 98% deficiency. We're a fraction, a very tiny fraction of where we were when we were younger. So just that alone, I like to look through the lens that NAD is a vehicle for change. It's a vehicle for healing. And if, again, going back to faculty and having resources and energy, if that molecule is depleted, it's really hard to heal. If you want to, knit your bone together or your skin, or you want to heal your cardiovascular system, or you've got this microcirculation issue because diabetes and the sugar overload, and you need energy to clean up the body. And so that's just sort of the first tenet, is looking at this aging process and how fast are we expediting ourselves towards aging, whether it be the bottles of alcohol every day or the medications that are shutting down liver function. We're expediting our aging process. And I see that with all the little insults that we choose and that we don't choose, the environmental toxins being one of those. So NAD really is that foundation. And then metabolically or chemically, I think it's fascinating to think that, it occupies some similar receptor sites to morphine and some of these other things. So it binds to the mu-opioid receptors in the brain. And so it actually takes up residence to facilitate this reduction in craving, which is very noticeable. I mean, on a sugar level or just a satiation level, when I've done, rounds of NAD in a row, I recognize that when I'm finished my meal is done. Like I'm not looking through the cupboard, like, did I get enough for dinner? It's an efficiency that comes through delivering that food from mouth to organs that is enhanced when you have enough fuel supply to be able to make that ATP happen inside the body. So, I mean, there's many other things, but I think those two are two huge ones in that recovery model: having more energy and then changing the landscape of craving.
Yeah, I just got to jump in here because this is, for one thing, the craving. I couldn't. Well, let's start with. I totally agree that with our current treatment options, we don't look at things like this, even though there's mountains of evidence to suggest that it will help you, like you said, get to that point of maybe reaching clarity faster or having the faculties to see options that you couldn't see. It is, like you said, all cerebral, all focused on, talk therapy,
Behavior,
this type of stuff. Why on earth would we not provide these supplements? When I was in that in the first states of early withdrawal and where post-acute was just starting, I was begging for something like that. I didn't know it was there. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I was quite shocked because I just did an infusion, my first one this year, and then I did another, the bigger one, the 500 one. But both of them, and I didn't even realize that I could improve this factor, but that craving, I stopped reaching for things. Like it did something that actually made a noticeable difference right away in that whatever is driving my mind to self-soothe that anxiety or angst. And I was quite surprised. Like you don't see something that has that kind of an effect usually that's just out there and available. Why aren't people using this? This should be something that is standard at treatment centers, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a dear friend. He's a colleague, and he was struggling with alcoholism, and he was sort of picking my brain a little bit, and it was night and day. I mean, obviously, he still had his journey in his story and the emotional things he had to go through, but NAD was the instigating factor to help him get his life back. And he's really sweet. He sends messages every once in a while, just letting me know how he's doing, and 15 months sober now. And I love hearing stories like that. And I love the awareness, even when we're post-acute. I think sometimes, especially in the recovery model, I think we kind of think, oh yeah, I dealt with that, I'm recovered. But there's so much recovery that still needs to happen.
Big mistake.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's not.
Go ahead.
It's not illuminated properly.
No.
I think because we've discussed this before, Corey, right? With the way our media portrays the acute withdrawal. Nobody ever talks about post-acute. Nobody cares about it. It's some people don't even believe it exists. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, post-acute is the thing that gets people. Anybody can tough it out for a couple of weeks. It's basically like having a really bad flu. People can do that, but it's the 1 year or 2 year, these long protracted symptoms. Why can't I feel better? Why can't I feel anything? Why can't I connect with people? And if you're not aware of how that long-term condition is affecting you, it's a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found real deep friendship and meaning in one of my dear friends, Tommy Rosen, and he's got a beautiful recovery community called Recovery 2.0. And he teaches through the landscape, the lens of yoga and Kundalini yoga, and he's got a beautiful community, and it's like a container. So I love when people, whether they're coming in through the door of the acute or the post-acute, but to have some sort of philosophical lifestyle community, that connection is so important. And sometimes that's just the thing that helps people get off of, and maybe initially they came in for the drug addiction or, whatever, porn, whatever it might be. But then they started to realize all these other attachments and addictions that were playing a role in their lives. And that's just like, it's like cutting the cords of those attachments that are holding us back. And so, yeah, the post-acute is huge because that's your life. Like that's where you get to, like, okay, finally close that door or graduate out of our childhood emotional attachment to the trauma and the escape. and now we get to graduate into who we actually are becoming. And that often, we see people, and not to not say anything bad about AA, but we see the people at the meetings, puffing away on their cigarettes, not doing anything about their physical vehicle, overweight, so obviously food addiction, insulin resistance, all those other things that, you just you graduate maybe from one addiction to another, or you replace it. And, it's pervasive. It's because we haven't given people the appropriate tools to work on the physical form as well as the behavioral one.
Could not agree more. And I think that one of the reasons people do find solace in 12-step groups, one of the good things, the positive things about it, is the fact that there are people out there who community. Absolutely. Yeah. It is those connections. And if that is, maybe for some people, that's 50% of the problem. They just don't have the support network in which that group is a fantastic option. It's there. They know the people are going to be there.
And accountability. Really well. I mean, I think there's off the top of my head, 3 big things that I think is nailing with immense positivity. And that's the community, that's the accountability with the sponsor. And then it's then there's some connection to, it's a deep connection to spirituality. The steps are really a process of helping, of scaffolding, a way of understanding how to move through something. It's kind of like allowing you to move from that childlike behavior into something greater. So there's so much positivity there. It's just, there has to be other things too that support the physical vehicle. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had a question about NAD and it may be relevant to some of our listeners. Are there concerns with liver toxicity for someone who's had long-term alcohol use or long-term opiate use, or maybe they have developed hepatitis or any other kind of complications?
With that, from what I understand at this point in time, and please, if people are tuning in, correct me, or please, post a comment, but NAD is vital to cellular function. And other than like intravenously taking it and having a really uncomfortable time, because let's be honest, it's uncomfortable getting the IV, there really isn't contraindication, because it's a nutrient that your body needs in order to heal the hepatitis. B3 is needed to work on alcohol dehydrogenase, the enzyme that breaks down alcohol, and it's rightly indicated to be given to help support recovery. So I have yet to see a role where NAD can't play, in this process, because it's just is vital to cellular functioning.
Yeah, I think especially for people who are having trouble with alcohol, just because of the nature of, like you said, the enzymatic process. Certain enzymes get exhausted. We know what it does to your natural supply of B vitamins. And again, why on earth is this? If you've got a problem with alcohol, one of the first things you should be doing is trying to correct those cellular imbalances. And NAD would be that would be the go-to as far as I'm concerned. But
yeah, and there's different forms, right? For people listening, you can do oral, you do the precursors. There's a product that's maybe newer on the market called Pricera, which is a recycling. It recruits a different pathway to recycle what's endogenously there. And then there's suppository, there's patches, there's obviously the intravenous, there's subcutaneous. There's all sorts of different ways to get it. And I think that, from a cost benefit point of view, it could just be starting with niacinamide, the B3 molecule itself, the more active form of it, I should say. And I think it'd be silly not for anybody to just start even just there.
Again, yeah, I agree with that. And that's, I learned that from a really good skin doctor here who works primarily with cancer patients in Kelowna here. And he recommends that for everybody who's, the treatments that they do require extensive healing. Yeah. And he always prescribes nicotinamide, and I started taking it because of that. And I think that's what actually got me started looking into the whole redox reaction there. And I did want to, I wasn't going to include this because it's getting a little specific, but I am curious and I'm going to do it anyway. What are your thoughts on the different forms of NAD? I mean, I'm guessing that IV is the quickest, fastest way to replenish. It's going to have the biggest kind of bang for your buck. But is there value? Can you really have good results with oral therapies as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a researcher. All I do is collect the research and then have more of an experiential attachment to it through the people that go through the process. So I'd say there's something really valuable about the NAD IV in that there's a hormetic, like a sort of stress when you're doing the IV. There's something about an attachment for people to recognize that the therapy they're doing is doing something in their body. So I think bang for your buck, part of it comes from having a really deep, profound, uncomfortable, and yet victorious experience of NAD. Because we go through so many different emotions when we're getting the drip. Like, well, this feels really uncomfortable. It could be racing heart. It could be sweating. I know every time I do it, I sneeze immediately. I feel pressure in my sinuses. I feel like an elephant sitting on me. And it would take an incredible amount of effort just to move my arm, and the pressure in the body is really intense. So there's some sort of connection, I think, that's profound in the sense that we feel a therapy. You feel a sauna. Saunas are amazing, and there's incredible research on saunas and what it does for the body, but you feel the sauna, you feel an NAD drip, and that's part of the value. And obviously you're getting in the blood, so it's going right, it's 100% absorbed. You're bypassing the GI, you're bypassing the liver breakdown. So I think efficiency wise, and definitely in the acute withdrawal period, or even people who want to build cellular energy, I mean, you get that sense that it's doing something. So there's huge value in that. No, from what I understand, like I said, simplicity, the niacinamide, there's the B3, 50 milligrams a day, apparently has great sustainable support for building NAD levels. I think there's some data to show that the NR, nicotinamide riboside, or the NMN, they are direct precursors, but in some of the research I've seen, again, I think everyone who's listening should just do their own as well, talk to different experts. But it seems that it starts to burn out some of the antioxidant pathways. And so there seems to be over time some reduction to glutathione. And there's an interesting paper, which I can share with you guys. Whereas the Pricera, the recycling form of it, where it gives supplies and energy. So Pricera has ribose and the niacinamide and something else, palm oil, so a fat. And that works on a different pathway that is not energy requiring. So interesting enough, the NR and NMN require a unit of ATP in order to support delivery and utility, where the recycling pathway just allows the body to recapture, and then through that process actually sustain and rebuild glutathione. Obviously, for those that don't know, that's a really important liver antioxidant, brain antioxidant. It has many roles in the body. So I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, who's the genius chemist who came up with that?
Right?
This guy figures out, we're wasting an ATP here. We got to do something about this.
No kidding, right?
That is
again, I need to dive into that deeper too, and I think it's worthwhile looking at. But at the end of the day, I think that's probably a process that eventually gets there. I think short term, I don't even know if there would be really an issue. And I think you probably gain more than you lose anyways. But probably, I agree with you. What a genius.
I mean, to do the work on that is on on a molecular level. That guy must have been, or woman, or whoever it was, hat tip to that person. That's really going the extra mile.
Don't you feel like I find it interesting in communication, especially with science. There has to be some level of trust, because a lot of this information gets passed down. You read a paper, maybe interpret it slightly different. It's like a game of telephone. However, there's definitely people there must be people actually diving in and doing this really interesting research. Us more lay people outside and more in the clinical or what have you, we don't know all those details. And so you
couldn't possibly if you wanted to.
Exactly.
This is the thing. And it is difficult. There's two factors that are maybe more challenging these days than ever before. One is the volume of information we have access to, and the other is the loss of integrity from some of our big regulatory bodies and sources of science that were unassailable before are all of a sudden under suspicion. And that has made my job more difficult as a healthcare professional, and just in general, I've found it difficult to find high quality data, new data. And I find myself questioning it and having to spend more time looking at sources of contributing financial parties and stuff like that. I mean, because some of this stuff is, the biases are obfuscated to the point in some cases where I got to throw them out because I can't, what am I supposed to do with the information? And it's a shame because there's probably tons of valuable studies out there that are not seeing the light of day because of financial factors. But
I mean, there's an incredible history there. I mean, like the amount of lawsuits against Pfizer, Merck, or some of these other, whether it be for the pain meds, to Vioxx, to, I mean, more recently, June 17th of this year, the EPA finally lost in court regarding the safety of glyphosate.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So think about there's this essence of time when it comes to safety of different things, products that are getting rolled out, and us as physicians, healthcare providers, pharmacists to medical doctors to nurses to everybody, we're mandated to follow the regulation body, even when they're wrong.
Yes.
That's how crazy it is. So obviously, NAD is not under, I guess, a patent or a control. I guess you could say everything that happens in a, compounding pharmacy is sort of off label, or maybe it's off label to some degree just because it's being compounded. But I mean, to think that us practitioners or people, teaching and researching that if we recommend anything against, or not even against, that just is not being spoken of, where does that land for people, especially when people are looking for trust and wanting to know whether or not something's valid. And what I always encourage people to do is, at the end of the day, we've got this basis of knowledge that's called science, and then we have our own experience, things that we can actually speak to. I know that this mug, to me anyways, looks blue, and there's silver on top and the bottom. Telling people something about NAD is really just spouting off research that I've just memorized.
Yep.
Right. But then I've had my own experience of NAD, and I know the repercussions of getting it, and that's where the value is. And so partly people have to enter into a bit of trust and step through that door of willing to have an experience.
Yeah. Go ahead, Corey.
Well, as I was looking at the communication that Nathan had with you before, and you had listed a few other treatment regimens as well, like use of saunas or enemas, and I don't know if you're talking about hydrochloric therapy in that case, or if it's that something too. Else.
I mean, do it the cheapest way possible if you can. Do it at home, right? The enemas. Some people might do better with colon hydrotherapy, but yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No, my point is just that these are all things that do give a fairly immediate result in terms of feeling a difference afterwards.
Totally.
And where it's a little bit less, we've talked in the past about, and no knock on things like antidepressants or pharmaceuticals, but where the results aren't necessarily as tangible or as readily noticeable for everyone. They may be for some, but for some they say, is this doing anything for me? Why am I on this? Again, so trust can waver that way.
Trust and experience for sure. Yeah. I mean, especially when it comes to the antidepressants, some of these things, they're performing as good as a placebo. So
if people
what's actually happening?
If people knew the numbers needed to treat on some of the meds that they were spending money on, if they really understood what was going on and how little effect they were having, I think the public would have a complete freak out. Yeah. If you could somehow get the point across in a way that was understandable all at once, it's they're not what you think. I mean, we have our good old fashioned antibiotics. We have our we have our heart meds and blood pressure meds and stuff. We know there's obviously effect. It's just, especially with some of these psych meds, the effect is not I mean, I've seen many trials where antidepressants have been less than overwhelming. That being said, I'm on 150 milligrams of venlafaxine, and I have been for a long time, and I can't get off it. It's very difficult. I've tried tapers, all sorts of stuff, but
yeah, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, and I think sometimes, I mean, there's always a role for things, and then at some degree, physiologically, habitually speaking, biochemically, hormonally, there becomes sort of like a merge point or an attachment to it.
Yes.
And physically, biochemically, mentally, emotionally, all those things, when there's a new sense of withdrawal, or there's a fight or flight response, the brain goes into that fight or flight, and we need to find our way out as soon as possible. And so, yeah, you bring up a really interesting point. And again, to Corey's question too, that's where I think there's all these other roles for these different things, and so we will do brain mapping and run ECG to find out where people are neurologically stuck. The saunas, of course, the enemas, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, red light, the beamer, working on all the different ways of communication in the body, from hormones to blood flow to the mitochondria to the oxygenation and beyond. I think that's where we want a full team working with us. It's like if you look at an NFL team, they've got the defensive coordinator, the offensive, there's the head coach, there's all these intricate parts that allow this team to operate, right? And I think that's the way to look at things. You got your pharmacist, your GP, you got the biohacking, the nutrition, you've got the ND, the chiropractor. What's your team look like? And if you're leaning one way, how does someone help just prop you up and get you to where you need to go? And Nathan, in your case, like, your story's not done, right? That's just your reality right now, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's true. And, I mean, you talked before about how none of us are perfect, and we can have the best intentions. And I mean, you're absolutely right there. What I tend to do is I do keep track of where I'm at on a fairly basic level day to day, and I look at more of where I'm trending. I know I'm going to have off days. I know there's going to be stresses. There's going to be things, unexpected things I don't know are coming, obviously. But as long as I continue to trend in a direction that's positive, then I know that at least my system or framework is getting me further towards the goals that I want to achieve.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, like, so many of us, we just keep referencing where we're stuck, and we keep referencing the trauma and our story. And we don't like, you're writing your own story each day, with your observation and noticing the gains and noticing, what you're letting go of. But I think, when we're stuck in that cycle, that frequency of addiction, we just keep finding ways to remember the pain and be in the suffering. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's powerful. I hope our listeners hear that. I almost wish when I'm re-listening to this episode, I'm going to go back 15 seconds and listen to that twice, I think.
There you go. Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Guys got it on repeat.
When you've brought up the hyperbaric oxygen therapy and the hyperbaric chambers, it made me think. I'm old enough to remember in the 90s when it was the Vancouver Canucks were one of the first sports teams to have a hyperbaric chamber, and they got in a lot of trouble for it. They were really criticized, and other teams thought that they were almost accused of cheating, trying to get the edge in that. What we know now too, as it's been exposed in time, is that the use of opiates and narcotics within professional sports has been rampant for many years and is only now coming into the light. And at the time, this hyperbaric treatment was considered radical and inappropriate, and
now they're everywhere.
Now they're everywhere, and now the light is on how horrific opiates are for us, and it's kind of
what a turn of events, right?
Yeah.
Our cultural priorities are just so out of whack sometimes. And obviously there's political pushes that get the public to those points. But that's pretty interesting how that, anything that's not any treatment modality that doesn't offer a real lockdown as far as long-term financial return. Anything that you can buy and continue to use without buying any more whatever to run it. All these things get negative press from scientific bodies who have the money to spend and unfortunately require funding from maybe some of these companies that don't want to see those products out. But
well, I think you bring up an important point. Like, I think if we were to look at them as businesses, it might take some of the stigma off them that they're these nefarious groups and, out for their own interest, but essentially it's a business entity.
I'm not saying they're evil individuals.
Totally.
But I mean, there's a diffusion of responsibility within a corporate entity that we know exists. And when it's driven purely by financial motivations, there can be big problems. And I think that's why science is currently in the state that it's in. But one of the things you mentioned here was this Beamer machine for increasing circulation. And I just wanted to know if you guys have been using that in the clinic and what the results have been as far as the feedback.
Yeah. So the Beamer technology, which was developed in Germany, it's a form of PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. So it's a therapeutic range of frequencies or a signature, I guess, that helps to massively increase the circulation in all the little capillary beds. So our body is 75, or our circulatory system is 75% of the cardiovascular system is in our capillaries. If you were to stretch out our capillaries end to our entire blood network and then wrap around the earth twice, it's so vast, it's hard to fathom. And if you were to lay them side by side, the arterial venous system, it would cover a couple football fields, or at least one. So like the surface area that exists inside our body of this blood network is incredible. And we sort of started this conversation with connection and having energy to heal. What is the way that we connect the head to the foot? It's through our nerves, it's through our cardiovascular system, it's through our lymphatics, right? So we have these systems that create connection. And so, whether we're creating connection to something greater than us, maybe outside or inside, depending on which way you want to orient yourself, to that greater connection, is it within, without, it's irrelevant. But the point is, on the physical level, there's this stream of, or there's these lines of communication. And so much of our dis-ease sits in our capillary beds because we can't oxygenate these tissues. So a reference to the hyperbaric. There's poor blood supply. There's a toxicity buildup. So there's a stagnation and chronic inflammation that persists. That could be, gout to diabetic retinopathy to all sorts of other things. But there's a stagnation in blood flow. And so Beamer technology is really about opening up these little miniature highways and super highways in the body so that there's an efficient communication again. And so what we like to do is pair or synergize these, quote unquote biohacks. We get people to jump in the red light along with the Beamer. So you're feeding mitochondrial stimulation and hormonal stimulation into the cells. And obviously the light does all sorts of cool things from a redox point of view to the structuring of our water. And, also that's a whole nother conversation, and then you get the superhighways opened all the way down to the little, towns, like the distal tips of our fingertips and all those little communities. And then you go into the hyperbaric chambers with this upregulated microcirculation, which from what I've heard, is around 16 hours. So you're getting almost a full day effect of this massive increased perfusion. And then you dump your body into the hyperbaric chamber, you're flooding your tissues and organs with oxygen. And so you're able to heal these areas of the body that just haven't been getting perfused. They're stuck in a toxic state. They're stuck in inflammation. So they're devoid of oxygen. They're hypoxic. And so now you're feeding all those little neuronal connections in the brain or the liver or the heart or pancreas or wherever it is. You're finally delivering it the nutrients it needs. And that vitamin O together with that microcirculation highway.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I would like to get involved.
Right? And what do people say? What do people who have been treated with that? What do they say afterwards or after a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things from improved eyesight to obviously getting rid of pain.
They throw out their Viagra.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people with long COVID, that have started to, have healed their lungs. They've got their lung capacity back again, and the colleague that really got, and this guy's all over the place, his name's Dr. Jason Saunders. He's a chiropractor in the US, and he's really helped to facilitate the communication of what hyperbaric does. His early experience of hyperbaric, he had foot drops and nerve damage in his, I think it was right heel or something like that. He was at a conference, he jumped in the chamber, he was in there for 20 minutes just to trial it out. He noticed he was actually just walking better after going through, and he asked the guys, hey, do you mind if I just hop in there a few more times over the course of the weekend? I'm really considering getting one of these because it's had such a profound effect on my nerve after just a short period of time. And so, by the end of the conference, I think he said he might be 60, 70% better than where he was before he came. And he's gotten to that, but he's literally helped to really put hyperbaric on a much bigger stage worldwide. And he's at surfing events, to working with the professional athletes, to, being with Dr. Mercola and some of these other alternative health gurus that are just really sharing the blessings of some of these therapies. So yeah, I think it's time to really look at environmental impact. Yes. How do we change our internal environment so it's in the right relationship for health and healing? And we have faculty of that. We have a capacity to do something about it, but we just need to learn about it.
Yeah, I agree. These technologies have existed for a while. They've been under the radar. I can't figure out why. And when you're in early recovery or post-acute withdrawal, anything that you can get your hands on that's going to have a noticeable effect, that's going to promote recovery, promote better health, it's got to be available as an option. That's the future I hope to see.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dr. Nick. It was just really great talking to you, and I've learned a bunch, and I'm going to do a little more research and look into some of these names that you've provided. And I'm sure we'll chat again.
Definitely, and we'll have you guys on a podcast as well. Look forward to having a conversation about your journey as well.
That is great. You got a couple podcasts, or that you do Dr. Dad's? As a can you tell us what those?
The Dr. Dad's. Excuse me. The Dr. Dad's podcast I do with a colleague. He's a chiropractor, Dr. David Wardy. That's like a brother of mine. He's in El Paso, Texas. So that one's like a sort of a playful, fun, scientific, deeper dive, innovation, biohacking kind of a podcast. And then the one I do with my wife, Health Ignited, that's a more inner journey. That's really looking at, the why behind. And it's super fun doing a podcast with your wife because, man, I've learned so much about Sonia that I just didn't know, there's pieces of her and David too, that I would have never, same for you guys, I imagine, you guys get to develop a relationship in a way where you get to hear people bounce their ideas off the soundboard of the ethers, and to hear sort of like what they're playing with inside their mind, and what a blessing that is to be able to do that with a dear friend and my wife, of course. So those are the two ones that we do. So we'd like to invite you guys onto those. Oh yeah, we'd be happy.
Be awesome.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we'll release you back because you're a very busy guy. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this, Dr. Nick. I wish you the best and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I always find that it's these little moments in life that your dad coming in and getting a chance to connect with him, have these really beautiful conversations with him and your mom, and now getting a chance to meet you. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I love the synchronicity of life and how these different opportunities create connections for all of us. So, and Corey, now you're on my radar.
Love it.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Likewise.
Right. Yeah, take care, guys.
Okay, see you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.